It's not just respecting someone's identity, it's forced. You're compelled to. If you misgender somebody at work, you can get fired. If you misgender somebody at school, you can get expelled. If you misgender somebody on social media, you can get, quote, canceled. Here we go. So this one is misgendering violence. And we were talking about this one earlier.
Acknowledge somebody legally who identifies as a bobcat, you understand would be insurmountable. The ramifications would be all sorts of new legal identifications that would be required, which don't currently exist.
As a gender?
Why the conversation? I would love it if you want to sit down afterward, and I would love to sit down and have continue this conversation. I would. Well, are you? Thank you, Thomas. Are you done?
Yeah.
I appreciate it, Thomas. Thank you.
I'm Madison. I'm co-president of Spectrum, the LGBT organization on campus.
Great.
Love to talk to you about this.
Great. Thank you, Madison.
So, what are
My name's Steven.
Okay.
I appreciate it. You sitting down, and what is it that you disagree with?
So I think you're confused on the idea of gender versus sex.
I'm confused. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So when we say there are only two genders, we often confuse the idea of gender and sex.
Sure.
Sex is a generalization of XY chromosomes, so we assume that, or XY, XX, combination of chromosomes. So we assume that male and female comes from your chromosomes, right? But that's.
You notice that there's a look. Have you noticed that there's a look?
Really just the idea that there's only two possibilities of sex, right? So even within sex itself, you can be born intersex, which means that you're born with sexual characteristics of both what we would consider male and female. And then you have gender, and gender is more about a mental state based off of societal norms. So within our Western society, we often discuss gender as being binary, meaning that there's two options.
Sure.
So boy, girl, man, woman. However, in other societies, non-Western societies, there are more than two options.
Okay, can I ask you a couple of questions there to unpack? Appreciate you taking the time, by the way. So what was your name?
Madison.
Madison. So let's go to the sex concept before gender, I think, because the idea of gender being different from sex is predicated on the idea that sex is binary. That's where you mentioned that term, gender binary. So you mentioned intersex. Okay, I'm aware of intersex. Now, of course, intersex doesn't necessarily mean that someone is completely between sexes. Usually they have very identifiable characteristics, like a very large clitoris or micro penis. In that case, it also affects 0.08. People think it's just funny, it's just true. Less than 0.08% of population Earth.
But they still exist.
Let me ask you this. In human anatomy class, how many fingers are you taught human beings have?
We're told typically that people have 10. However, there are people born with 11
But you're
fingers.
taught 10, right?
Yeah.
So we don't teach people there are people born with 11 fingers, there are people born with 12 fingers.
Yeah, but we don't completely dismiss that those people exist just because that they're uncommon, do we?
We teach that human beings have 10 fingers. I would wager that everyone here has been taught, human beings have 10 fingers. Of course, there are anomalies. That's the same way that we treat intersex, or these, as you said, you mentioned chromosomes, genetic abnormalities that are a very extreme case. So I think what we need to do is remove this extreme case with sex, just as we would with how many fingers, toes, how many kidneys you have, how many feet you have. There's something that's typical, there's something that's atypical. Then you go to gender. This is where, listen, I'm open. Everyone has said sex is different from gender, and gender is not non-binary. So I would allow you to kind of unpack that for me.
Yeah, so in Western society at least, so in our country, in our society, we tend to think of gender to be on this binary spectrum.
No. See, that's wrong. So again, first point, the rest of the world doesn't believe this, so it's an ideology. Okay, they say it's not rooted in biology, but the rest of the world disagrees. Okay, great. And then she goes, in our country, and again, you haven't even reached consensus in our country about this exact topic. There is a very small portion of the population that shares in her beliefs, and it is being forced down our throats with compelled speech, with neutral bathrooms, with whatever legislation is getting passed to normalize this. And in some states, they're actually going in the opposite direction and banning, say, kids having whatever surgery at a young age that's permanent. Obviously, I'm not going to say the names because it probably is going to get the whole goddamn video demonetized, but you know what I mean. There's kids that are deciding their own surgeries, children. There are states that are now banning those affirmations from happening. No, even in this country, we do not agree.
You don't, well, not even really a spectrum, just a binary. So you have man, woman, and that's it. Those are the only two options. However, gender really is more of a spectrum. So it's
And I'm wondering, when you have people like this, you remember that video we saw prior with the ixies, the zombies, the cake self, crayon self, all that. So can you use a different word than gender and just say how I feel in my head? Because gender and sex is tied together biologically. We've used them interchangeably, and the rest of the world uses them interchangeably still. It's only in the West where that idea is starting to get pushed on everybody that they are separate when they in fact are not, according to most of the world. So consensus is they are linked. Okay, but what's the word? Neo-pronoun? What do you want to call this? You got to give it a different name, because if you were to call it something completely different, like stylistically, I feel like my fifis of the month are cake gender, by all means, bro, be a cake gender. You can fifis whatever you want, but you can't decouple gender from sex and expect us all to go along and change up language and meanings. And you want to be called they, thems, them, theirs, crayon selves, and all this stuff. Live your life. You're an adult. You can make whatever decision you want, and you live with those consequences. But I don't have to partake in your ideas. That's part of being in a free society. What doesn't feel free is the fact that I can't speak on something like, I don't agree with what you're saying, and the consequences losing your job. The consequences being ostracized from your whatever you do for a living. Your business gets shut down. You get the woke mob to cancel you. That doesn't seem very inclusive and free. That's the issue people have with this entire topic.
It's non-binary. There are not just two options.
Okay.
You have man, woman, and then everything that doesn't fit into just man and woman is considered non-binary. That's an umbrella term, and that includes a lot of different categorizations.
So how many genders are there?
You can't put a number on the number of genders because everyone uses different words to classify themselves.
I would disagree. That's where it changed my mind. I'm not convinced that anyone can just use any classification for themselves for their gender, and certainly not that then we have to compel society.
And then you have to play this weird pretend game with yourself when you go visit a doctor. I've heard some say like, it's none of your business what I identify as or what's in between my legs. I go, cool story, okay. So the rest of the world has to not care what's in between your legs, but the moment you visit a doctor, it's absolutely pertinent that you tell them what biological gender you are, because that directly affects the amount of medicine you get per body, male or female. We get different stuff. Or you may be affected with different ailments that affect men more or women more. So you have to disclose that to your doctor. Your doctor doesn't play pretend with you. Your doctor has to know the truth. But the rest of the world, everybody else, has to play the pretend game.
To address them this way, right? I'm sure you can understand that the compelling of language is an issue.
So what gender do you think you are?
Well, I'm a male.
Okay, well, I think you're a woman.
No, legally I'm a male.
Oh,
it says on my driver's license that I'm a male.
Okay, so that's your sex.
No, I'm also a male.
Sex. It's your sex.
It says on my carrier certificate that I'm a male. Gender. Some legal documentations say gender.
What if I say I don't believe you?
It doesn't matter.
Exactly. It doesn't matter if you don't believe me.
No, it doesn't matter because biologically...
What gender do you think I am?
You're a woman.
I would assume you're female.
Yeah, see, you're making assumptions.
Yes.
I identify as non-binary.
Oh, hey, wow. Respectfully, it doesn't matter.
It does matter.
Now, let me ask you this. What would you say if I have...
It matters what pronouns you use for me. It matters how I'm socialized in society. It matters my gender expression. It matters the way that I'm allowed to express.
So, okay, is the word then gender expression and not gender? And even then, how do you cake self a gender expression that you feel light and fluffy? Cloud self? How is that a gender expression? You would still need another word other than gender. Like, shouldn't it be, what would you call it, guys? I don't know what to give this name, because gender's the wrong word to be using along with expression. I don't know.
Express myself. It matters what bathroom I use.
Personality, identity expression. Yeah, it could be called personality expression or identity expression. You identify as a cloud. It's not gender though. They're mixing the word, identity and expression.
Matters who I'm allowed to live with. It affects every aspect of my life. So you saying...
What pronoun should I use?
You should use they, them pronouns. So you saying that you don't believe me...
What if I don't?
If you don't, I would consider that disrespectful, and that's actually an act of violence to misgender a trans person.
It's an act of violence.
That is an act of violence to intentionally misgender someone, yes.
Here we come to the issue, and this is why I'm out here. You just said that's an act of violence. That means it's an actionable offense. That means it's a crime. So you believe that for me...
I didn't say it's a crime. I said it's an act of violence.
An act of
There's
violence.
a lot of things that are not considered crimes that are acts of violence.
What? Dude, violence is a crime. Violence means hurting somebody else unlawfully. Always. That's what violence is. Violence leads to it. Again, dude, this is what I'm talking about. Not all violence is crime. Oh, I didn't say you should be arrested. But it is when you call it violent. Yeah, it goes from 0 to 100 real quick, doesn't it?
Okay, so you believe it's a non-aggressive act of violence.
I think that, okay, when you misgender someone, if you were to misgender a trans woman,
Yes.
Trans women, especially trans women of color, are have the highest rate of murder within the LGBT community, right? So if you were to intentionally misgender a trans woman.
Yeah, but that community also has a self-harm rate of like 40%. That community also engages sometimes in acts that put them at danger, like not telling the other sex that they're sleeping with that they have, quote, transitioned, and they get a negative reaction.
Woman, that could put her at risk of murder. You understand that? Because people think because you're trans.
I don't understand.
I think that really does show that you're privileged in the situation then.
Yes, I believe we're both.
I think you're extremely privileged in the situation that you don't have to experience that, or that you don't have to worry about that, or consider that you don't feel like you need to respect people's pronouns.
I'm considering this and I'm asking you questions. You said these are the pronouns I need to use.
Yeah.
I said, what if I don't? You said that's an act of violence.
Yeah, I would consider that an act of violence against me.
Okay, so that's a crime.
I would consider that
an act of violence against you is a crime.
I would consider that.
So,
I would consider you being disrespecting me as a person, and that's not okay, and that's not even ethical. It doesn't matter if it's legal, it's not ethical. And I don't know how you can do something that's considered unethical.
I don't know how you can not allow me to speak and ask questions based on your own premises. Please, we're trying to keep this civil. I haven't yelled at you. I haven't accused you of anything. You're getting very heated. You said that's an act of violence. That's a crime. Okay.
I didn't say that was a crime.
An act of violence. You said an act of violence against you is a crime. So
I did not say that.
You said it is an act of violence against you.
I said it's an act of violence, and I said misgendering anyone's an act of violence.
Yes, you said it is an act of violence against that person. That is in fact a crime. So here's my question. Since we've now decided we don't know the number of genders, it's a spectrum. It exists. There is no set number. You've asserted the premise that we are required to use the pronouns that are preferred by the individual. We have no idea how many pronouns there are. We can never know how many pronouns there are. And to not use a proper pronoun is an act of violence against them. Did you ask my pronouns before you sat down?
No, I didn't ask your pronouns because
Why?
I haven't referred to you with pronouns.
You didn't ask my pronouns, though. You just said you can ask.
Yeah, you can ask. What are your pronouns?
But you didn't ask.
What are your pronouns?
You just talked about me being privileged. You understand? No one goes around asking pronouns before they speak with people.
I asked you
and
how
so
you
to ask of a
yourself.
restructuring of society
I did ask you how you
based on a number
yourself.
that's not tangible with gender versus sex is something that is incredibly corrosive.
Did I not ask you how you identify yourself?
No, I don't believe so.
Yes, I did. I did actually. You said you identify as male, and that would.
After the conversation, sure. Okay, well, let's say that. Sure. So we need to ask pronouns before every person. Yeah. And if we don't use those pronouns, how many pronouns are there?
It's the same kind of thing. There aren't like a limited number of pronouns.
So people can see the sign, would it be okay if you just step aside for just a second there?
There's not a limited number of pronouns.
Thank you very much. There's no limited number of pronouns.
No, I would say the typical ones are she, her, hers, him, his, her, his. Okay. Sorry, him, he, him, his, and they, them, theirs. Those are the typical number of pronouns. We usually use 3.
Okay. So I just want to, again, the goal is here to change my, I'm open to new ideas.
Yeah.
There's no set.
Yeah.
Different kind of space around us. I think no one's being accosted here. We're just having a conversation.
No, there's no question of accosting. We're just trying to bring the conversation so that it's not like a kind of like a separate stage spectacle kind of deal. So we're all in conversation around, and we can engage with your sign. And
sure, I appreciate it, but it's not though. Actually, it's a conversation between 2 willing participants right now, and I will
go. Other people talking as well, though.
I'm not. I don't consent. So
this is your setup, and we're supposed to just follow your rules. And this
yes, when one is invited and we've gotten the proper permissions, and I've said
open campus, a college campus.
Sure, it's an open campus.
We can actually do whatever we want.
You can do whatever you want. You can protest, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to be engaging in conversation with the crowd.
Necessarily have to be my rules.
What's your name?
No, that's not incorrect.
I'm a student
but I would love to continue my conversation here. So when we talk about gender and sex, right? This is a very new idea. You said in Western society.
It's not a new idea.
Really?
No, it's not a new idea.
So when did gender theory start? When did gender and sex become separate?
Well, they're actually it's not necessarily the idea of gender theory. It's the idea that there have been different genders outside of man-woman for centuries.
Okay, how so?
Yeah, India.
India.
In India, they have third gender. Native American cultures, they have third genders.
Sure.
In ancient Egypt, they had third genders.
Okay.
So it's a very Western idea to say that there are only 2 genders and that this whole thing is a new idea changing our culture.
Well, you know what else is a very
society.
Western idea? So it seems to me your presupposition there, correct me if I'm wrong, is that because other cultures have done this, there's a precedent.
Yeah,
okay.
I don't think that we're hermetically sealed in any way.
So you do realize, and you talked about how very different it was from Western culture. So antithetical to Western culture, you named India, ancient Egypt. You know what else we also believe in that's antithetical to those cultures? We're against slavery.
Why? I'm sorry. I'm really confused as to why you brought slavery. Let me
about
gender.
I would love to bring it up.
Yeah, that's kind of a
my point is because your premise is because it's found in other societies, therefore it's okay. Or it is to be good. My point is there are plenty of other practices. Well, I'm trying to get to why I believe it's harmful, and you're explaining why you don't. But the point is if something was practiced in another society, and it was harmful in another society, and we agree that it's harmful, for example, we both agree that slavery was harmful. We both agree that maybe cannibalism is harmful. You can find these practices in societies. My point is it's not a valid argument to simply say it's been found in other societies if that practice is harmful. So it comes down to the idea of, is it productive or harmful for us to separate the idea of sex and gender?
Other on a form, like you said, the ramifications for that in legal.
So that's the question. So other societies have done harmful things. I think we can agree that doesn't necessarily mean that it's.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I don't think respecting someone's identity makes that harmful. I don't understand. I think.
Again, the issue is not. It's not just respecting someone's identity. It's forced. You're compelled to. If you misgender somebody at work, you can get fired. If you misgender somebody at school, you can get expelled. If you misgender somebody on social media, you can get, quote, canceled. You're not allowed. It's not about respect. It's my way or the highway. This is the issue. It's forced. If you want to identify as an attack helicopter, you're more than welcome to. Nobody cares. But you're making everybody else call you that. This is the problem.
I don't agree with you comparing gender identity to cannibalism or slavery. That seems pretty offensive.
I know. It seems you think a lot of what I've said is offensive. You've been set up here from the get-go for it to be offensive, and I'm not trying to offend. Let me re-explain what it is.
And again, they'll argue in circles because they'll say, well, that's because it's violence to misgender somebody. So yes, it should be legislated for. Well, then it's like, it's not about respect then. You just want me to do what you say. That's tyranny.
Take any practice, okay? Take the practice of neck stretching, for example, which is not harmful, okay?
It is harmful, actually.
Okay, well, some people don't think it's harmful. They don't think it's harmful in these societies. Take any practice that's relatively benign that we believe to be harmful that they don't believe to be harmful. The point is, just because another society at one point has practiced it doesn't make it correct. Can we agree on that?
I'm sorry, I think you're making really false comparisons.
No, I'm not.
I do. I think you're making false comparisons.
Can we agree? Because listen, there are also many societies the other way, right, who've only ever recognized two genders, two sexes.
But that doesn't mean
That's
that these
most.
other genders don't exist.
That's most. So you're implying that those societies were wrong.
I'm implying that they have their other societal standards.
Right.
Societal standards are based off of a lot of things. It's very intersectional, what we decide to accept in society. So if you're going to say, well, because you're
society can be wrong.
making the same argument. Yeah, society can be wrong.
Exactly.
Society was wrong about gay marriage. I think people are wrong saying that, gay marriage, being gay is unnatural and being gay is a crime.
Okay.
That's society being wrong. But you know what? We adapt to modern times, and I think that we need to.
But you just compared us to ancient Egypt and India as though that was a valid argument for convincing me why they have more.
This isn't an ancient practice. This is still going on.
Sure.
In other countries, this is still going on.
But you just said it's not fair to use other societal comparisons.
I'm
because
saying
we adapt.
It's not fair to compare gender to slavery.
No. I'm trying to get to the premise of the argument. I'm trying to get to the premise. I'm trying to get to the premise of your argument here, okay?
The premise
and I'm trying to keep this as
argument.
very respectful as possible. You said this has been practiced in other societies for a long time.
Yeah.
My point is that's not an argument because there have been horrible things, maybe benign things, maybe semi-harmful things in other societies. We would both agree on that. So it's not a valid argument.
To bring slavery back, though.
No one is arguing to bring slavery back.
Exactly. So why are you?
Well, actually, of course, it still exists in other countries in the Middle East and some countries that you've mentioned.
Like I said,
Does your birth certificate say anything besides male or female? In some states, I believe it does now. I believe it's neutral until you affirm your gender.
I don't think you're making a fair comparison. I think
I'm making a very fair comparison.
I think you're kind of just going on a tangent in order to try.
My point is, it's not an argument.
It is an argument. I think it's an argument.
Okay, so I will use your
argument. Our Western standards are not necessarily the pinnacle of what we should be doing. Western societal standards do not mean that we all need to be following the same thing because we're not all Western and we don't all follow those beliefs. So if a Native American person...
Of course you do if it's the law. We all have to follow the law.
Yeah, okay, so the law is different. I think the law is different than a societal standard. So legally...
Well, hold on a second. How is the law different? It is the societal standard legally.
Legally, yeah.
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 Let's stay within those parameters.
Okay, sure. So there's other countries that are considered Western that would recognize a third gender.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that. Okay.
So why not?
So how many genders are there? It comes back to if we're going to change this.
After Crowder made negative statements about Fox News.
So we are sitting here talking about gender.
Yeah. So if I were as a person,
this is a modern theory in the United States, right? Sex and gender were interchangeable. No, I'm going to finish one sentence here, okay? I would appreciate that. You've been very privileged in speaking over me. I'm not convinced, right? The job here is for you to sit down and change my mind. And I think that's very productive for you to do with other people on campus. I don't think this is a way to change somebody's mind.
I don't think you want your mind changed.
I have had my mind changed.
Want your mind
well,
changed.
instead of assuming that, how about actively trying to change it? So my point is, you've mentioned that it's non-binary, but you haven't given me a number of genders and how we restructure society. You've merely pointed out that it's an act of violence to use an improper pronoun. See, I think that would have, you just talked about a societal standard. If the societal standard is using the wrong pronoun is an act of violence against somebody, I think that's an incredibly dangerous societal standard, and it's one that nobody can uphold consistently. Would we not agree?
Right. I mean intentionally using the wrong gender. I mean, when you know someone's pronouns, you intentionally use the wrong pronouns because you don't agree with them or you don't recognize their identity to be real, that's an act of violence because that's purposely disrespecting someone. No one wants to be purposeful.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the conversation that we've seen on TikTok is even accidentally misgendering somebody is a form of violence because that shows your, what was the word they used? Ignorance, in that you're not taking the time as a cisgender male or female to learn about trans people and their problems. Therefore, that's a form of supremacy and trans whatever-ism, bigotry, whatever you want to call it. They'll call you 10 different things. So yes, if you don't educate yourself as a cis person, it's because you're a phobe. That's what we've heard, man.
Fully disrespected.
I believe me, I understand.
Called you the wrong name all the time. How would you feel?
I would feel very disrespected if you, for example, came in bombastically.
Like, this is a slippery slope issue, right? Because now we must accept pronouns. Okay, it was he, him, they, them, whatever, she, her, right? Then it turned into neo-pronouns. Then it's like new neo-pronouns on top of that. Then it's like cake genders and all this other crazy stuff. And now we're getting into two spirits, and now it's expand, and it keeps expanding, and the ideas become more and more radical. And if you don't abide by them, you will be outcasted. And it's like a leftist type of puritanism that's happening, where the most virtue signaled, the most radical of the ideas are the ones that get pushed, and it's never ending. That's, quote, the slippery slope, because even the regular LGB side of the TQIA whatever is now being lambasted because they're not being, I saw a Twitter I covered with Sophie the other day that they're not queer enough, that they're not engaging in queer politics, and they're not queer politicking, and it's not enough. It's like they're cannibalizing themselves. It's wild to see. I mean, ideologies have become radicalized in societies before, and we see how that turned out. If you're not part of that in-group and you're not a zealot,
and other people interrupting, I'd feel very disrespected.
Hey, can she develop that act of violence thing? Like, where does that take us? If someone uses the offensive pronoun, it's
so it's intentionally using the wrong pronoun. So if you ask someone their pronouns, or they would correct you and say, no, sorry, these are my correct pronouns, and you continue to disrespect them, you have to understand how much that puts a trans person at risk.
Yeah.
So does that person go to get arrested for using the wrong pronoun, or like it's an act of violence?
Act of violence. I know that you like to say that an act of violence means that it's legally a crime.
It is.
That's not how I'm defining an act of violence.
It doesn't matter how you define an act of violence. This is the thing. We have to have legal definition.
It doesn't matter how you define an act of violence.
No, it matters how the law defines the act of violence.
I don't think it does.
You don't think it matters how the law defines an act of violence?
No, I do. I'm saying that an act of violence does not have to mean that it's a crime. I'm saying that it's
an act of violence against another person, an unwilling participant, is in fact.
Okay. Let's see. Where does this end?
It's pretty societally based.
Okay.
I would say.
Amphibian.
What about
he, her, his, her?
How do we determine that?
Whether they're male or female.
Yeah, but how do we determine that's? What if we decided that she, her, hers was what we were going to use for males?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We right now.
Yeah, right now.
We have male and female.
Now, so that's
his or her.
Current standard, right?
No, it's a biological standard.
The words that we use are based off of like what we as a society use, though.
Not
right?
entirely.
Yeah,
no, they're reflections.
Linguistics is pretty societally based.
Okay.
I would say.
No, they're reflections of reality, mostly, actually. What is an apple? It's a physical thing. We call it an apple. What is a boy? It's a physical thing. Call him a boy. What are trees? What are clouds? We use those as descriptors. Words are descriptors for what we perceive with our eyes. That's just what is reality. It's not this whole societal thing. Those are abstract concepts.
Amphibian.
What about amphibians?
Is that societally based?
Amphibian.
An amphibian is a I don't, you know what, I'm not a science major, but I will say an amphibian is a like scientific classification of an
Reptile.
animal. Yeah, it's a classification of an animal species.
Bush, tree, blueberry.
Yeah, okay.
Are these societal
what's your
terms?
point?
The point is that language is a reflection of standards that we have as a society. Are doctors sexist?
I think some doctors are sexist.
Are doctors transphobic if they refer to their patients who have a penis and they come in for a prostate exam as a male? Is that doctor hate speaking? Is that an act of aggression?
I think if that doctor misgenders their patient, then yeah, they are being transphobic.
Okay. Well, my mind has not changed, but I think I tried to find some common ground. I'm sorry that we didn't.
Listening. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry that you feel that way.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madison.
I'm not going to shake your hand. Thank
I
you.
figured.
Watch Good Morning Mug Club live.
Oh my God. Somebody gets challenged and butthurt. You can't have a conversation when they're so emotional about it. That's the issue today. How do you have a conversation with somebody that's emotionally teetering on the edge because their ideology is entirely their identity? So when you have a pushback, you have a conversation challenging them, you're challenging them personally. It's not an idea. It's not a concept. It's personal. Their world around them starts to crumble because in the little echo chambers that they live in, nobody challenges them. They only affirm. That's it. Welcome to The Problem with Society Today.